The story begins inside a prison known as the Shawshank Redemption. It is considered one of the most secure and heavily guarded prisons in the world. Thousands of prisoners live inside this prison, but not a single person has ever managed to escape from it. The security is so strict that even thinking about escaping is almost equal to signing your own death warrant. Some prisoners spend their entire lives inside these walls because anyone who tries to escape is punished with death. The scene then shifts to a man named Andy Dufresne. Andy is a successful banker whose life suddenly changes when he is accused of murdering his wife. During the court trial, Andy desperately tries to prove his innocence, but the court rejects every argument he makes. In the end, he is sentenced to life imprisonment, meaning he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. After the verdict, Andy is transferred to the terrifying Shawshank prison. Inside the prison, we meet another inmate named Red, who is appearing before the parole board in hopes of finally earning his freedom. Red has already spent 20 years in Shawshank, but despite all that time, he has never been granted parole. Once again, his request is rejected. At the same time, a truck carrying new prisoners arrives at the prison, and Andy is among them. The older prisoners begin placing bets on which new inmate will cry first during the night. Red bets on Andy because he looks quiet and emotionally broken. Later that night, the older inmates begin screaming loudly to scare the newcomers. One prisoner quickly breaks down and starts crying hysterically, but Andy's cell remains completely silent. As a result, Red loses the bet. Hearing the prisoner's cries, Captain Hadley arrives at the cell. Hadley is the chief guard of Shawshank and is known for his brutal behavior toward inmates. He drags the terrified prisoner out of the cell and beats him mercilessly. The next morning, everyone learns that the prisoner died from his injuries. Andy becomes deeply disturbed after hearing this news, but the other inmates warn him to stay quiet and mind his own business. As time passes, Andy slowly adjusts to prison life. During this period, he learns that Red is capable of smuggling almost anything into the prison. Andy approaches Red and asks him for a small rock hammer. Red becomes suspicious and thinks Andy might be planning an escape, but Andy denies it. Red eventually agrees to get the hammer for him. He also warns Andy about a dangerous prison gang called the Sisters, led by a man named Boggs. The gang is notorious for harassing and attacking new prisoners. Unfortunately, Andy soon becomes one of their targets. During his first few months in prison, most of his time is spent either working in the laundry room or fighting off Boggs and his gang. Despite all of this, Andy remains surprisingly calm because his friendship with Red continues to grow stronger. The two men spend more and more time together and slowly become close friends. A while later, the prison announces a job opportunity where inmates are selected to repair the prison roof. Using his connections, Red manages to get Andy and his friends assigned to the job. One day, while working on the roof, Andy overhears Captain Hadley complaining about the heavy taxes he has to pay. Since Andy used to be a banker, he begins explaining legal ways Hadley can reduce his taxes. At first, Hadley gets angry at Andy for interfering, but after realizing how knowledgeable he is, he becomes impressed. Andy offers him a deal. If he helps Hadley save money on taxes, then Hadley should reward the workers with cold beer. Hadley accepts the offer, and after the work is completed, Andy and his friends finally enjoy a few bottles of beer together. As the years go by, Andy becomes more comfortable inside Shawshank and forms friendships with many inmates. His life slowly starts feeling better. A few days later, Andy goes back to Red with another unusual request. Andy is a huge fan of actress Rita Hayworth, so he asks Red to get him one of her posters. Red finds the request strange at first, but eventually agrees. The next day, while Andy is working, the Sisters suddenly attack him again. This time, Andy refuses to back down and directly threatens Boggs and his gang. Although Boggs becomes nervous after hearing Andy's threats, he still brutally beats him. Andy suffers severe injuries and ends up spending several days in the hospital. After this incident, Boggs is punished and locked in solitary confinement for a month. But when he returns, Captain Hadley attacks him so violently that Boggs becomes permanently paralyzed. Once Andy is discharged from the hospital, Red gives him the Rita Hayworth poster. Andy happily hangs it on the wall of his cell. Meanwhile, the prison warden also becomes aware of Andy's financial skills because of his ability to save people money on taxes. One day, the warden personally searches Andy's cell while Andy quietly sits there reading a Bible. During the search, the warden finds nothing suspicious, which impresses him. He allows Andy to continue reading the Bible. Sometime later, Andy is assigned to work in the prison library alongside an elderly inmate named Brooks. In return, Andy begins helping the prison officers with financial planning and tax advice. Over time, Andy dreams of expanding the prison library. The warden tells him that if he wants funding, he should write letters to the government. Andy spends weeks continuously sending letters requesting money and books for the library. library. Slowly, Andy's reputation grows. He even starts giving financial advice to officers from other prisons, eventually becoming the warden's trusted financial advisor. Around this time, Brooks suddenly breaks prison rules for the first time in his life, shocking everyone because he has always been calm and well-behaved. The truth is that Brooks is about to be released after spending 50 years in prison, but instead of feeling happy, he is terrified of the outside world because everything has changed during those decades. Out of fear, Brooks even tries to attack another inmate so he can remain in prison forever. Fortunately, Andy arrives just in time and convinces him that life still exists beyond prison walls. Later, Red explains to Andy that prison walls are strange. At first you hate them, but eventually you become dependent on them. Soon after, Brooks is finally released. Outside prison, the modern world feels completely unfamiliar to him. He has no family, no home, and no real purpose anymore. He starts working at a supermarket and tries to adapt, but the loneliness slowly destroys him. Eventually, Brooks takes his own life in a hotel room. Before dying, he carves the words, "Brooks was here," onto the wall. Back in prison, 6 years have now passed for Andy. After years of persistence, the government finally sends funding for the prison library, along with old books and music records. Among them, Andy discovers a beautiful music record. Wanting every prisoner to hear it, Andy locks himself inside the warden's office and plays the music over the prison loudspeakers. As the music echoes through Shawshank, every prisoner freezes in silence. For a brief moment, even the most dangerous criminals stop and peacefully listen to the beauty of the music. The warden becomes extremely angry after this incident. He sees Andy's action as a serious violation of prison rules and immediately punishes him by locking him in solitary confinement for 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Red, who has now spent 30 years in Shawshank, once again appears before the parole board. He hopes that this time he will finally be released. But just like every previous time, his request is rejected again. At the same time, the government increases funding for the prison library after seeing Andy's dedication and good behavior. Andy uses this money wisely to expand the library further and also starts teaching other inmates how to read and write so they can find better opportunities after release. As time passes, the warden also begins to benefit from Andy's intelligence. He secretly uses Andy's financial knowledge to make illegal money and forces inmates to work like laborers, increasing his own profit. To hide his illegal earnings, the warden opens multiple fake bank accounts using a false identity named Randall. This person does not exist in real life and is only used on documents. Andy continues to manage all of this carefully, making sure that if any investigation happens, the blame will fall on a fictional person instead of the warden. Years pass, and in 1965, a new inmate named Tommy arrives in Shawshank. He is sentenced to 2 years in prison. Tommy is friendly and quickly becomes close with Andy, Red, and the other inmates. One day, Tommy asks Andy to help him complete his high school education. Andy agrees and begins teaching him regularly. After months of hard work, Tommy finally prepares for his exams. However, during the exam, he gets frustrated and throws his answer sheet in the dustbin and walks out. But Andy does not give up. He retrieves the paper and submits it to the board himself. The next day, Tommy reveals a shocking truth that completely changes everything for Andy. Tommy tells him that in his previous prison, he met a man who had confessed to killing a golfer and his girlfriend. That man also revealed that the crime was falsely blamed on a banker. Hearing this, Andy is completely shocked because the banker being described is actually himself. Andy immediately goes to the warden and demands that his case be reopened so Tommy can testify and prove his innocence. But the warden refuses outright. He knows that if Andy is freed, his illegal financial system will collapse. As a result, the warden sends Andy to solitary confinement for 1 month and secretly decides to eliminate all proof of Andy's innocence. Soon after, Tommy is taken outside the prison under the warden's orders. The chief guard, Hadley, shoots him, killing him instantly. With this, the last hope of Andy's legal freedom is completely destroyed. The next day, the warden informs Andy that Tommy was killed while trying to escape. Andy refuses to believe this story and becomes deeply angry. He stops helping the warden with his illegal activities. However, the warden threatens him, saying that if Andy refuses to cooperate, the prison library will be shut down forever. Broken and depressed, Andy loses hope. Red notices his condition and tries to comfort him. Andy then reveals his deepest truth. He has always blamed himself for his wife's death and believes his life has been meaningless ever since. But he also shares one final dream: to escape prison and live peacefully in a small town in Mexico. He even tells Red about a specific hidden place where something important is buried and asks him to visit it after his release. Time continues and Andy goes back to secretly managing the warden's illegal money system, but Red remains worried about him. His concern grows when he learns that Andy has requested a 6-foot rope hope. The next morning, during roll call, Andy is missing from his cell. After a search, it is discovered that Andy has escaped from Shawshank Prison. The truth is that Andy had been planning his escape for years. Using the small rock hammer given by Red, he slowly dug a tunnel through his cell wall. He carefully removed the dirt and hid it in his pockets, throwing it outside during yard time so no one would notice. The Rita Hayworth poster on his wall was used to hide the tunnel entrance. On the night of the escape, Andy collects all of the warden's documents and evidence in a plastic bag and crawls through the tunnel to freedom. Outside, the warden discovers Andy is gone and begins searching for him in panic. But by then, Andy has already accessed the warden's secret bank accounts under the name Randall. He withdraws all the illegal money and transfers it. At the same time, Andy sends all evidence of the warden's corruption to a newspaper. When the story is published, it creates a nationwide scandal. Police raid the prison immediately. Captain Hadley is arrested for murder, along with other corrupt officers. When police reach the warden's office, they find him dead. The warden has committed suicide, unable to face the consequences of his crimes. A few months later, Red receives a postcard from Andy. It reveals that Andy has safely reached Mexico. When Red finally completes 50 years in prison, he appears before the parole board again. This time, he speaks honestly about his regret and takes full responsibility for his past actions. The board is finally convinced and approves his release. Outside prison, Red struggles to adjust to normal life, just like Brooks once did. He begins working at a grocery store. Later, he travels to the location given by Andy and finds a box containing money and a letter revealing Andy's exact location in Mexico. Before leaving, Red visits the place where Brooks once stayed and writes his and Andy's names on the wall. In the end, Red travels to Mexico, where he finally reunites with Andy on a beautiful beach. After years of separation, the two old friends meet again, and Andy is finally free and truly happy.